Hello, everyone. I think we're about to get started. So welcome. I'm absolutely delighted to be hosting the Diet and Nutrition session. I'm Catherine Fletcher, the Research Communications Lead at Parkinson's UK, and I'm going to be joined with some wonderful experts to help us go through this session. As the leading funder of Parkinson's research in Europe, we are not just only dedicated to understanding more about the causes of Parkinson's to lead us towards a cure, but we're dedicated to helping people live better with Parkinson's today. And diet and nutrition is an important part of that. So I want to, first of all, thank our sponsors for this session. So Roche have kindly sponsored the session, and they're out in the marketplace if you want to have a chat to them. So we will have time at the end of the session for questions, both online and in the room. So please do hold your questions to then. But first, I'm absolutely delighted to welcome Dr. Marta Camacho to the stage. She's a Parkinson's UK funded senior research fellow at the University of Cambridge, and she's going to be talking through some of her research, but looking at the links between the gut and the brain. So over to you, Marta.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Catherine, for inviting me. It's my first ParCon, and it's been two very enjoyable days. Before I begin, I would like to make a public apology, though, to those of you who shared the table at the Parkinson sing-along and had to hear me sing the Beatles. I truly apologize for any hearing damage that I might have caused. But today I'd like to talk to you about our research on the role or the importance of the gut in Parkinson's disease and brain health. See if the slide. Oh, there we go. So people with Parkinson's report a lot of gut symptoms. Although it's known as a movement disorder, people with Parkinson's may have difficulty swallowing, which can have very nasty consequences such as people choking or having pneumonia, excessive saliva, and also constipation. Our research focuses on constipation because it seems to be a really important feature of Parkinson's. Now, not everyone with Parkinson's has or will have constipation. Our research shows that even in advanced stages, some people just never develop it. But those who do often report that it's been present years before the diagnosis. In fact, for those of us who do not have Parkinson's, if we have constipation as young adults, we're 2 to 3 times more likely to develop Parkinson's in the future. And if you do have Parkinson's and constipation, often people will experience pain, discomfort, bloating. If you're feeling constipated and full, you might have loss of appetite and weight loss. And in more severe cases, you might have to be admitted to hospital. So it seems like a very important feature to address and research, but I'm particularly interested in this link between having constipation and developing Parkinson's in the future. So within our research, I analyzed the data of about 400 people with Parkinson's at diagnosis, and I followed them up over 8 years. And we saw that those with constipation at diagnosis seemed to progress faster, not to balance problems and falls, but to memory and thinking problems, so Parkinson's, dementia. Now, this was particularly interesting. So not only constipation is a risk factor for Parkinson's disease, but also might be one of the factors that explains the diversity of progression rates that we see. Now, for those who have constipation now, there is a silver lining to this. Although it is a risk factor for accelerated progression, unlike other risk factors that we currently know, such as being male or older age, or for example, there's genetic susceptibilities to have dementia, we can do something about constipation. We can tackle it with exercise, with diet, with laxatives. But it also offers another opportunity. If it is a risk factor that we can research, then we might have a bit of an insight about the mechanisms by which constipation in the gut might lead to further disease in the brain. And indeed, one of our research studies, who just been accepted recently for publication, shows that when I asked 30 people to go into a PET scan that assessed neuroinflammation, so inflammation in the brain, I saw that those with more constipation seem to have higher inflammation in the brain. So maybe showing that the immune system might be implicated. So we can not only tackle constipation, but perhaps this immune change is associated with it. And although there's been a lot of development on the microbiome, as someone was saying earlier on, and in gut-brain axis in general, I actually found that there were not enough tools. How can I study this properly if I can't assess it? So before we moved on, we developed a questionnaire alongside with people with Parkinson's that told me what they're experiencing and how I should ask them about it. We also developed more objective measures. Well, I should say validated, because these already existed for non-Parkinson studies. So the Blue Poop Challenge, which I invite you all to do in your households, is an objective way to measure transit time. So you ingest the blue baking dye, the ones that you use in cake, and you note the time that it takes for you to poop blue. And this gives us transit time. And as we expected, those with Parkinson's poop blue much longer than their household spouses, although they had the same diet and the same environment. We also can measure constipation through a breath test, because the gut microbes, not bacteria, but archaea, that are associated with constipation, produce methane, and we can detect it in their breath. And equipped with these tools, we found two interesting pilot results that actually elicit more questions than answers. One was a small sample size of people with Parkinson's. Those who had higher methane levels, it correlated with memory scores. Again, supporting this link that I saw recently between the questionnaire that asked about constipation and memory and thinking problems. But this was in a low sample size, so we needed to validate this. The other parallel pilot study that I found very interesting was with the gut hormone, so ghrelin. Ghrelin is produced in the stomach and does many things in our body. One of them is being responsible for gut motility, and also has anti-inflammatory effects. And as we expected, because other researchers have published this already, people with Parkinson's and people who are at risk of developing Parkinson's did have low ghrelin levels, which perhaps might explain the low transit motility, at least partially. So with the very kind support of Parkinson's UK, in the next 3 years, I'll be very busy conducting these two studies. One is MedPro. It's an observational study where we're going to try and validate what I found in that small group of people with Parkinson's to see whether methane, which is a very simple objective measure of constipation, you just blow into a glass vial for 3 seconds and that is it, can be a good biomarker for constipation in Parkinson's, and whether the archaea, the gut microorganisms that produce it, are they involved, are they associated with both the gut symptoms, but also the Parkinson symptoms that we see in people? And of course, if they are high, can we decrease them? So there's one single non-Parkinson study looking at a specific probiotic. Now, probiotics are products, it can be a yogurt or capsule with a live bacteria that we think might have any type of positive effects on human health. In my case, there's a probiotic that might reduce archaea. Now, is this, first of all, possible? Will we see it in people with Parkinson's? And will it bring any beneficial effect? If so, then I will have enough support to apply for a clinical trial. But these are early days, and we first need to go through the stages. And we were ambitious. We're going to recruit 200 people, including people with dementia that don't have Parkinson's. Because what if these mechanisms that we're finding are overlappable with other diseases? Maybe we can join scientific efforts to try and study this and delay disease progression to dementia in whatever neurodegenerative disease we're talking about. And the second one I'm equally excited about, with ginger. So if ghrelin levels are decreased in people with Parkinson's, of course, let's try to boost them up. But how? Ghrelin currently is only injectable and is really quickly absorbed in the human body. Within 30 minutes, it's usually degraded and taken up. So we need to find more sustainable, more long-term ways to increase ghrelin levels. So I looked at the literature and we saw that ginger, both in humans and animals, seems to increase ghrelin levels. We're going to see whether we can replicate that in people with Parkinson's disease. We're going to give them ginger supplements for 3 months in the hopes that that will be an effective way of increasing ghrelin levels. If it is, yet again, it will be a scientific support that we need to run proper clinical trials with them. I'm very, very excited about these, and I hope to be invited in 3 years' time to share the results of these studies with you. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Marta, for sharing your research with us. And yeah, we really look forward to following the progress and sharing it back with you all soon. So next, I am delighted to invite Dr. Marja bin Islam to the stage. So Marja bin is a consultant neurologist and a researcher at the University of Sheffield. And she's going to be talking a little bit more about tips on diet and medication timing. So over to you, Marja bin.
Thank you very much, Catherine, for a lovely introduction. And it's a great pleasure to be doing my first Parcon. So I will start with a small story. So I was a first-year trainee neurologist, and I met a lady. She had a diagnosis of Parkinson's. It was a lovely lady, accepted the diagnosis with such a grace. But then when she was leaving my clinic room, she asked me $1 million question. So she said, Doctor, throughout my whole life, I have eaten healthy, maintained a very good lifestyle. I have got now Parkinson's, so what shall I eat? To be honest, I didn't have much idea or knowledge about diet at the time, but that actually drove me to do the research on diet, gut microbiome, and Parkinson's disease. So now the question is, what is a Parkinson's diet? It does not exist. There is no single diet that we can say that this is Parkinson's diet. But what I do or suggest to my patients is this 8-step approach where there are 4 do's and 4 don'ts. So I will break it down for you. So at the top, you can see whole grain and fiber. So we all know that whole grain, leafy vegetables, fibers are good. But why these are good? Because they nurture good bacteria. So these bacteria ferment those fibers and then give us a very important chemical called short chain. So it's great for protecting inflammation, and now newer research coming that it may also protect the gut neurons as well. So the first thing for the healthy diet is whole grain, fiber, and vegetables. Now the second point may be the most important in this slide for Parkinson's patients, that is protein. So we need to have a good amount of protein because as we grow older, we start to lose protein. So we start to lose strength, and that increases our risk of falls. So we need to have at least 2 or 3 meals with good rich protein. If you are vegan, take vegan protein, that's also fine, but make sure you incorporate good amount of protein in your diet. But there is an important point here. So protein can often interfere with the drug levodopa that we all prescribe as the first-line drug for Parkinson. So it hampers the absorption of the drug. So that's why we advise patients to take the drug at least 45 minutes before and after of taking any protein-rich meal so that it does not hamper the absorption. You can take, so some patients say that, Doctor, I feel my stomach is irritated when I take the medication. So that's absolutely fine. So you can take a small cracker. All we are asking is not to take any heavy load of protein with the drug. So the third one is hydration. It's absolutely important for our patients with Parkinson's. Why? Because it is necessary to prevent constipation, dizziness, low blood pressure. So hydration in any form, it may be water, it may be juice, or any other form of fluid should be fine. So the fourth important one is healthy oil and fat. So we definitely need good source of oil and fat to maintain the energy balance in our body. So you can take good source of oil or fat in terms of nuts, which is a good source. You can also take plant-based oil to cook. So that's important. So these are my 4 do's for my patients. Now there are 4 don'ts for the patients. So what are these? So we all know that we should not be eating indulgent, high-energy food, don't we? But we do. So these are particularly important for patients with Parkinson's, because higher the glucose load, the more risks of advancements of Parkinson's, especially the motor symptoms. So we need to be very cautious when we are eating processed food with high calorie, high sugar and salt. Now, this is a common question I get. So, doctor, what should I do with alcohol? So there are some mixed data about alcohol. Some say that it is not good, some say that it may be reducing the risk of Parkinson, but there is no conclusive data. So what I suggest is we need to minimize the alcohol drinking in a certain level, which is 14 units. And the reason behind it is, although there is no particular link between Parkinson's and alcohol, but it may damage your gut barrier and promote inflammation. So moderate drinking is suggested. Tea and coffee. So tea and coffee is rich in a chemical called flavonoids. Flavonoids are good for any kind of neurodegenerative conditions like Parkinson's. But there are 2 points I want to emphasize. So you can drink tea, coffee, caffeine, flavonoid drink, berry juice, and etc. But make sure you don't drink much at the later part of the day. 1, it can cause sleep disturbance, and Parkinson's is already known to patients with Parkinson's. They do get some sleep problems anyway. And number 2 is these are a form of diuretic, so it increases the production of urine. So we do not want patients to go up and down into the toilet. So make sure we drink them in the daytime, not at the later part of the day. And the last one I find very important to address. So this is more important when the disease progresses. Why? Because it becomes more, the texture of the food becomes more important, because the patient may develop swallowing problems. So this is something that we need to consider. So the next topic that I want to address is vitamins. So we all know that with the disease progression, the patients with Parkinson's develop the risk of falls. So we need strong bones, and for that we need vitamin D. So the main source is usually if we get the sunshine and sunlight. If not, milk, cheese, or milk products would be a good one. But we need the bones to be stronger so that in case there is a fall, it minimizes the risk of fractures. Vitamin B is another important one I want to address. So the levodopa, that increases a level of a chemical called homocysteine. So homocysteine, what it does, it reduces the level of vitamin B12. So patients come to us, say that they feel fatigued, they feel the memory is not quite right, brain fog. We check their vitamin B12 and that comes back low. So we need to make sure, if you feel like that the memory is not quite right, fatigue, then you can get it checked and it's an easy fix. There are other vitamins like vitamin C and E. So there is an apparatus into our cell called mitochondria. So they generate energy for our cells. And Parkinson's, this get damaged. So we tried different antioxidants in different trials to see whether that rescues the Parkinson's dopaminergic cells. It does not actually do much, especially in the supplement, but diet source of vitamin E and vitamin C is always good. And finally, there were much hope with the coenzyme Q10. So it's again another antioxidant. This is good, but in the bigger trial, it did not really show much difference. If you want to try, you can always speak to your doctor about them. My last slide is a bit of an update of the new research. So you may have heard hormone called glucagon-like peptide, which is an important hormone for metabolism, especially the glucose metabolism. So this hormone we got interested in because this has got protective effect on neurons as well. So there has been a number of research on a number of drugs which actually act as an agonist, which means which enhances the level of the GLP-1 into the body. Now, this is being treated with an injection, and that enhances the level of GLP-1. So there are 5 different types. The first 2 types, initially it showed some promise, but unfortunately it didn't show much benefit. But that's not the end, because there are a couple of other new drugs which are in phase 2 trial, which showed some improvement with motor symptoms and non-motor symptoms. So there are still some hope alive, and we're hoping that with larger trial data, we might show some positive impact. Now, there is a question raised that why these 2 drugs, the exenatide and the form of exenatide, did not work. So one of the suspicion is because it's externally delivered, so the patient inject the drug into the body. Whenever it reaches to the brain, it loses its efficiency. So that made us interested in our research. So we want to see whether this GLP-1 hormone, we can increase it within our body. So that's what I'm researching at the moment. So we are trialing a medication which is supposed to increase the level of GLP-1. And I'm also particularly interested in the population of bacteria into the gut and see whether they have got anything to do with the GLP-1. So just to summarize, there is no alternative of a good healthy diet with whole foods, good fat, good protein, and vitamins. We need to nourish our good bacteria in order to be able to have a good health. And finally, I'm hoping the day will come when we can give personalized diet and nutrition plan. But at the moment, let's stick to good food and good diet. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Marjabin. I'm delighted to hand over next to Rochelle, who is a registered dietitian with over 20 years of experience. She's been living with young onset Parkinson's now for 9 years, and she's going to come and talk to us a bit more about the Mediterranean diet and about nutrition PD.
Okay, so forward. Okay. Oh, it's a full room. I couldn't see behind me. So it was really interesting to hear the 2 prior presenters. So I'm going to follow up in terms of what can you practically do, because I think from what's been shared with us, we can see that the gut has a big role to play in Parkinson's. I was really interested when I heard the research that was shared with regard to Parkinson's being associated with potential further progression in terms of cognition or the Parkinson's dementia. And it's something, as you know, myself living with Parkinson's, we all fear, you know, in terms of losing our mind as such. And I think anything we can do to preserve our cognition is really important for us. So as mentioned as well, there's no specific Parkinson's diet. But as a dietitian, you know, people always ask me, like, it's the first question, you know, what diet should I follow? And really, in terms of the evidence that's out there at the moment, the Mediterranean-style diets are probably the ones that are kind of, you know, if you're a betting person, I'd be betting on the Mediterranean diet as being the Parkinson's diet at the moment, certainly from the evidence that we have, which is not huge because, unfortunately, there's not a huge amount of funding in nutrition research because it tends to be quite expensive because you need to run it over quite a long period of time. However, there's a lot of evidence about the Mediterranean diet, which I'm going to explain now. But what is it basically, the Mediterranean diet? It's minimally processed food. It's health-protecting foods, so, you know, which are on the right-hand side that you can see on the slide here. It's a specific dietary pattern. So we used to focus just on what type of foods to eat, but it's actually the combination of foods that has the most benefit to our health. And then there are specific foods that we have identified in things like the MIND diet. There's a specific type of Mediterranean diet. So things like berries, which were mentioned, I think, along the way, green leafy vegetables. So these contain what was mentioned, these polyphenols, these foods that contain antioxidants that help to reduce inflammation in the body with Parkinson's. Because we're seeing more and more in terms of the research that Parkinson's is really kind of an inflammatory condition. That's what we're seeing. So there's a lot of beneficial micronutrients in the Mediterranean diet, which is very important for us. And also, as I say, these phytonutrients that specifically come from these plant-based foods. So the Mediterranean diet is seen as what they call a plant-forward or plant-based diet. So you'll see on the right-hand side that you don't necessarily have to cut out red meat, but it's the type of meats that you're choosing. So minimally processed meat. So giving up having the sausage and rashers every day of the week, or 3 or 4 times a week, having the takeaways 2 or 3 times a week. These are what are causing a lot of the problems in chronic disease and including Parkinson's. The other thing then in terms of red meat is lean red meat is perfectly fine, but trying to keep it to about 2 servings in the week. And we're actually on this research stand outside, and we have a few food models to show you what a portion of red meat looks like. And you'd be quite surprised how many of you are probably eating a lot more than you realise. And then in terms of what kind of healthy meats, it's going for your lean poultries, okay? But focusing on also the healthy fish. So the oily fish was important because it contains omega-3 fats, which are anti-inflammatory, again, help us to dampen the inflammation in the body. We're also looking at moderate dairy. So a lot of people ask, say, oh, should I cut out dairy? There are some research studies showing that there's a risk association between dairy and developing Parkinson's, but there's no research to show that it actually progresses Parkinson's when you have it. And actually, in terms of Mediterranean diet, they have moderate dairy in that. So that's about 2 servings in the day. So generally speaking, in terms of healthy eating guidelines in the UK and Ireland, it'll be about 3 servings a day to make sure that you get enough calcium to keep your bone health. And you also have to remember that dairy is actually very important for your cognition. It's shown for every 2 servings of dairy, you actually improve your cognitive outcome. So sometimes cutting something out can also have negative impacts. So then treat foods, the top shelf foods, the cakes, the biscuits, all those guys, fall into what we call the ultra-processed food category, which a lot of people are talking about at the moment. And ultra-processed foods are really foods that are high in sugars, fats, the kind of sugars and fats that are not good for you. They tend to be the cakes, the biscuits, the takeaways. They're not the sort of processed foods. So it's not just a food that has lots of, that's packaged. That's not ultra-processed. It's the foods that when you look at the label, it has so many ingredients in it, you don't understand it. That's what an ultra-processed food is, and it's very high in emulsifiers. In particular, is one area that we're looking at in terms of affecting the gut, which ultimately may be affecting Parkinson's also. So olive oil is also a really important constituent, and olives of the Mediterranean diet. And obviously getting those whole grains that were mentioned are really important to nourish the gut, and also the fruit and vegetables, which are like nature's multivitamin, gives you all of those micronutrients and phytonutrients that I mentioned. The other thing that's very focused on in the MIND diet are pulses, so chickpeas, kidney beans, lentils. They're also very nourishing for the gut as well, and also nuts and seeds. So many people don't really eat enough of either of those food types. So what are the benefits of the Mediterranean diet? So if we just talk about general health, this image here shows you all of the benefits of having a Mediterranean diet pattern in your day-to-day life. So reduces the risk of brain diseases, including Parkinson's, improves eye health, reduces your risk of asthma and allergies, improves blood glucose levels, and reduce the risk of obesity. And we know that people with diabetes have a higher risk of developing Parkinson's, and people who have uncontrolled diabetes have a faster progression of Parkinson's than those who have controlled diabetes. It also helps to reduce cardiovascular disease and improves immunity, which was mentioned about the impact of diet on the immune system, and improves the gastrointestinal health and your gut microbiome, and reduces certain risks of cancer. So it has huge benefits. So even if you weren't going to focus on your Parkinson's, it's going to actually help you live longer with all the other things that we could potentially develop along the way. And research has shown that people who have followed a Mediterranean diet, which is assessed using a dietary scoring system called the Medi-score, that for every 2-point increase in the Medi-score, predicted they would live longer and reduce the risk of cognitive disorders. And this was particularly higher in women than men. And I have a theory around that, is that women have more estrogen, and estrogen is actually anti-inflammatory, helps to protect our brains for longer, and that's one of the theories around why women tend to, it's not as prevalent in women as it is in men, because men obviously don't have the luxury of our lovely Easter dial. But there is actually evidence to show that men do have estradiol, but actually, not obviously as much as we do, but men who have more estradiol in their body have a slower and less aggressive form of Parkinson's than those who have less estradiol in their body. So there's impact of hormones as well in the picture. So there was a study also done in the UK, or in the US, by a dietetic colleague who worked with Michael Okun, who's an expert neurologist, movement disorders specialist. She looked at the average Mediterranean score in people with Parkinson's. And they followed the Mediterranean diet over a 5-week period, and their score jumped from 4.4 to 11.9 in just 5 weeks. So you can see the research says if you increase your score by just 2 points, that you can improve your cognitive outcome and live longer. So you can actually improve that just in a 5-week period. So what are the benefits in Parkinson's? So in terms of the randomized controlled trials that are out there at the moment, it shows that it helps reduce constipation, which you've mentioned here, helps to slow progression in terms of your cognitive and dementia progression potentially. It also improved indigestion, and there is research to show that upper GI mucosal damage, such as indigestion or GORD or esophageal reflux disease, is associated with a higher risk of Parkinson's. So getting on top of that is really important, pre and even when you have Parkinson's. The other thing is improved executive function. So a lot of people that I would speak to about Parkinson's, they talk about, I kind of feel tired, I can't really think straight, I can't multitask. They are executive functions that are affected in Parkinson's. They're non-motor symptoms, and they are improved with following a healthy diet, particularly the Mediterranean diet. It also showed improvement in language skills and cognitive function, which I just mentioned. It also increased the antioxidants, which help to quash those oxidants, those free radicals that cause damage to our bodies and our brain. Just wondering how much time I've got. I wasn't looking. I'm still good. And it also helps to produce the short-chain fatty acids, which was mentioned as well, and are shown to be really potentially beneficial to the gut-brain axis in Parkinson's and potentially helping to slow progression. So there was a review paper done by a nutrition researcher in Australia. And the quote at the end of that paper was, a healthy diet with higher intakes of fruit, veg, fish, and healthy fats was associated with a lower incidence of Parkinson's, milder symptom severity, and slower disease progression. So I think, there's a lot there that I think we could wait until we get all the research in the world, but, actually improving your diet is going to improve your life with Parkinson's and prevent, hopefully, other conditions, which might get us before Parkinson's. So I've just got here on the screen, you see there's a code. You can scan it with your phone if you'd like. We've developed a Mediterranean PD score, which combines the Medi score and also the Mind diet score. So it includes things like berries and green leafy vegetables. So if you want to scan it, or I think this has been recorded so people can look at it later on, or if you're online, you can actually go through it yourself and actually find out what your score is. And then you'll start to see where you can make some improvements. There are caveats in terms of the Mediterranean diet. I'll just go back so people were trying to get that code. Give it a second. So there are caveats in terms of the Mediterranean diet. It may exacerbate slow stomach emptying and certain gut conditions. So slow stomach emptying is called gastroparesis, and people with Parkinson's are quite prone to this. I think it's probably something that's under recognized and under treated at the moment. So when you have slow stomach emptying, so most of you here are probably, hands up, many of you are taking levodopa medication, those of you who have Parkinson's. So a lot of you. So levodopa basically needs to get from your mouth, down your esophagus, into your stomach, from your stomach into your intestine, then into your blood, to your brain. And do you know that only 5% of your levodopa actually makes it to your brain? So there's a lot of things that can get in the way of that 5% getting to your brain. So we want to try and work very hard to get as much of that to our brain. And the thing is, if you've slow stomach emptying, that tablet basically gets stuck in your stomach, and it gets broken down, and you don't get as much of it getting to your brain. So that's why people with slow stomach emptying tend to have worse. They don't switch on with their medications as well as people who don't have slow stomach emptying. And when you have a high-fibre diet, which the Mediterranean diet is a high-fibre diet because of all the fruit and veg and the whole grains and the nuts and the seeds, etc., it can actually slow down, worsen gastroparesis. So for some people, it's not a good idea to take. Now, you can moderate that, and ideally you'd want to see a dietitian, but also in terms of if you've got symptoms of gastroparesis, and in our gut health program that we're launching today, it teaches you all about what are the symptoms of gastroparesis and how to manage it. The other thing is with the diet, if you've got things like Crohn's disease or ulcerative colitis, of which are called inflammatory bowel disease, these are actually associated with a higher risk of developing Parkinson's. When you're put on anti-inflammatory medications for these diseases, the disease risk reduces. So again, indicates there's an inflammatory process going on there. I myself have celiac disease. I think it's part of my picture of Parkinson's in terms of the whole gut-brain axis. So the other thing is in terms of fibre. So my point there is if you've got ulcerative colitis and it's very active, or you've got diverticulitis disease, which is active, it's not a good time to pile a whole load of fibre in there. It'll just irritate it more. So you need to wait until it calms down before you add lots of fibre in. And also, you don't increase lots of fibre all in one go, because if you have constipation, you load in lots of fibre, it's going to actually make it worse initially. The bowel needs to adjust to gradual introduction of fibre. The other thing is people who have malnutrition risk. So you'll see there's another QR code there if you want to scan it. It basically allows you to do a self-assessment of your malnutrition risk. So a lot of people with Parkinson's are at risk of being underweight. And this is actually, it's shown that there's an association between being underweight, BMI under 18, and a faster progression of Parkinson's. So it's really important to get on top. If you're losing weight, you need to get on top of that. So we'd advise people who have risk of malnutrition or a high malnutrition risk score not to start the Mediterranean diet and to actually speak with your GP or your neurologist and see a dietitian. The other thing is about the Mediterranean diet, it needs to be adapted to your individual circumstance. So if you have diabetes, you can have gastroparesis. If you're diabetic. If you've celiac, obviously it needs to be gluten-free. You need to make sure that your TTT levels are normal if you're celiac, because otherwise if they're not normal, you have a lot of inflammation going on in your body, and that's going to be causing some of your bowel symptoms. You need to adapt the diet to specific cultures. So in the Mediterranean PD program that we developed, we actually adapted some advice around specific Asian diets, African American diets. And people sort of often say to me, a friend of mine is Parkinson's, is Nigerian. She's like, I don't eat Mediterranean foods. But actually, it's shown that people who follow their healthy cultural diet, and in fact, the original Nigerian diet is actually a very, very healthy diet. So it's about using the foods that are healthy within your culture and replicating those in the patterns of the Mediterranean diet. The other thing is then request a referral to a dietitian. Now, unfortunately, we know that 9 out of 10 people with Parkinson's can't get access to a dietitian. But what's really important is if you don't ask, you definitely won't get. So if you have a lot of things going on, complications, other comorbidities like diabetes, Crohn's disease, whatever it might be, it's a good idea to try and get to see a dietitian. So this is why basically my company, My Moves Matter, I've recently developed a series of online nutrition programs called Nutrition PD. So we've got 2 programs, the Mediterranean PD program, and now we're just launching a Gut Health for Parkinson's program, because to try and bridge this gap, to give people what I call the low-hanging fruit, give them the information that they're not getting, which can really help improve their lives while they're waiting a year to see their consultant. So I'm very delighted. So in these programs, there's 12-week access. It's self-paced. It's been built all on the basis of feedback of focus groups and surveys that we've done with people over the years. So there's 12-week access, bite-sized videos. There's resources you can download, menu plans, etc. There's also community support. There's an Ask a Dietitian, so you can ask those questions online. We've also just introduced a webinar for each month of the program where you can ask your questions of the dietitians. So I'm delighted to say that Parkinson's UK are offering 90 places of the program, either the Mediterranean or the Gut Health program, for free for people who cannot afford it at the moment. So if you go on to this, again, you can scan this QR code, you can apply for that. But we, in My Moves Matter, are also offering 20% off for people who otherwise can afford it if they'd like to take part in the program. Because what we want to do is, really get more and more people sort of understanding about nutrition. Because I think from what we've heard today, I think it's the missing piece of the puzzle in terms of Parkinson's care. It's very important to go alongside exercise, because if you're doing a lot of exercise and you're not actually replacing your calories, that's going to be detrimental to you. It was mentioned about having enough muscle. You need that to make sure you have enough calories and enough protein. There's a talk about interactions between protein and foods. There's so many things that we need to sort of manage from a diet point of view, but that's why we've got these programs, is to try and make it simple so that you'll be able to implement some of these yourselves at home. So thanks very much for listening to me, and I'll finish there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rochelle. And last but no means least, I want to welcome Brian to the stage. So Brian has been part of our Parkon organising committee and has helped us shape and organise this event. So many thanks to him and the rest of the group for that. But he's going to come and share his reflections and share a few poems with us too. So Brian, please come to the stage.
Thanks very much. Right, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Brian. I'd like to start my part in this diet discussion by just saying it's been a huge pleasure to be first listening to and now sharing my thoughts with the three previous speakers. I was diagnosed in 2011, so I've got 14 years experience of living with Parkinson's. But I'm still learning something new every day, how to cope and live with Parkinson's. When I was told by my consultant, I asked her the question, so how do I go about living my life now? Just live it as if you would be before you were told. And that's what I try and do. I endorse everything that's been said by the three previous speakers. However, all our journeys are different. But I take my condition very, very serious. Like I say, I was diagnosed in 2011. By 2014, I knew my handwriting was suffering, getting worse and worse. So in an effort to try and preserve it, I started writing and drawing. So in an effort to show how I live with Parkinson's, I'm going to share with you the E factor. But first, 2 poems. The first one's called The Daily Ritual. It's become a daily ritual, a task I must complete, a set of actions performed regularly before I drink or eat. It's my daily tablet intake, the pills that help me function, to aid my speed and mobility, not forgetting posture and stability. 14 tablets a day, different in colour and shape. Each one has its role to play in helping me to operate. So this is how I survive. This is how I live. So I say, thank you to the drugs and power to the pill. And the second one is, again, it's about my diet and how I go about it. Originally called, it's a Parkinson's menu, but that's not very inspiring. So I came up with another one, the proof is in the pudding. But again, I think I knew I could do better than that. So I now give you food for thought. I have an anniversary looming. It's one I'd like to share. It's how I deal with my Parkinson's during times of happiness and despair. For 14 years it's been in my life, from early morning to late at night. My medication helps me. I take 14 tablets a day. Add to this lots of exercise. It seems to help keep my Parkinson's at bay. There's one more special ingredient. Maybe this could hold the key. Having the right diet, what you eat for breakfast, dinner and tea. But I don't think I have a special diet. No specific food do I eat. I don't count the calories in a meal, nor do I care if it's low or high in protein. My diet's more a case of eating what I want and when. Because I work some funny hours, sometimes I have my tea at 10:30. Included in my diet, though, is always salad and fresh veg. I'd pasta, chicken, meat and fish. Might get myself a spot on MasterChef, cooking my signature dish. As part of my diet, I have a liquid intake. This includes Carlsberg, Budweiser, and Newcastle Brown Ale. All taken in moderation and never when driving the next day. Hopefully in time, when Parkinson's is no more, I'll brew my own beer, and I'll like to pour you all a pint, and we'll call it Parkinson's Cure. I mentioned before the E factor. Where I come from in Newcastle, when I tell people about my condition or they find out for the first time, the reaction's always the same. E, never know old. And it's not an E like in the alphabet E. I'll just come to my next slide. E-E-E-H. The first E stands for experience. Like I say, I've got 14 years of experience. Taking my medication on time, turning up for my hospital visits, and obviously my diet. The other A is for exercise. I know how important exercise is in living with Parkinson's, so I do running, golf, walking, football, and I still work full time. I work 12 hours a day, 4 days on, 4 days off. So that work provides us with loads and loads of exercise. We've touched already on eating. That's the third E. Obviously, my diet. And H for humour. Humour is vitally important. And anybody just diagnosed, or even people living with Parkinson's now, with like me, if they can take these 4 things on board, it's you can live not a complete life, but some way to having a normal life anyway. That concludes mine. And
well, thank you, Brian. I have heard them before, but I still think they are wonderful. And yeah, thank you for sharing with the room. I'm afraid we only have 10 minutes or so for questions, but hopefully we can take a few in the room and a few online. If we can start in the room, and I'll get the online ones up, and our lovely panel will help answer them.
Hello. Wonderful session, and we could run a whole conference just on this one topic alone. Perhaps we will one day. I'd like to concentrate on the issue of protein and the relationship between when you eat. I've heard so many versions of this. I normally work on an hour before and then an hour afterwards, but other people say it should only be half an hour. I'm not sure about volumes as well. For example, is it as important to have a drop of milk in a cup of tea? I normally have black tea around about the time I take my drugs. But if I put milk in there, what effect does that have? What's the difference between a light meal of pasta, for example, and a heavy Sunday roast? Because from what I hear, it's not just the stomach, but it's all the way through the whole digestive system. And certainly, I can't imagine food has gone all the way around there. So perhaps you could give us a little bit more detail.
Yeah, thank you. It's a great question. So to come back to your first question is, excuse me, with the tea with milk. So I think the answer is it's best to avoid any source of protein just before and after the drug. Now, there is a caveat because it does not hamper everyone. So there are data that there are people who can take protein and have the absorption as well. But the general suggestion is not a big protein meal, and if possible, avoid even a smaller amount, like a piece of cheese or small milk into the tea just before you take the medication. Now, coming to the second part of your question, there is an answer to this. So now new data coming up, and it says that it's often better to have heavier protein in the later part of the day The reason behind it is you need to be more active in the morning and the afternoon time. So take less amount of protein at that period. You can still enjoy your Sunday roast probably later than the usual time. And then probably in the evening when the need for dopamine is probably slightly lesser than the daytime. So if you take heavier protein, probably better to take in the later part of the day. Have I answered to your question?
Partly, yes. Sorry, I've lost the mic. The other, because the evening is particularly difficult. Sorry, evening is particularly difficult. Strictly speaking, I should not eat anything after 7 o'clock in the evening. But of course, you know, this weekend, for example, very difficult to avoid eating later in the day and so on. So it's just a matter of how you judge these things and what the significance is.
I might come in
Yes.
on the back of that. Can you hear me all right too? So I agree. I mean, generally speaking, it's half an hour before. Sometimes it can be 45, longer. It depends on where you're at, sometimes in your Parkinson's. But generally, if you take it half an hour before on an empty stomach, that's going to be, for most people, sufficient. It's usually an hour to 2 hours after, because obviously you've eaten a meal. So depending on, so if it's a bowl of vegetable soup, it's obviously not going to have as much of an impact. You know, obviously if it's loaded with, you know, chicken, it's going to have more of an impact on your levodopa absorption. But if you've got, going back to your big, large carvery meal, you've got two things there. You've got a lot of protein in it, but you also potentially a lot of fat, and fat slows down the emptying of the stomach as well. So it's about just being aware. Like, it's not about stopping life, but it's about being aware. If you're going to go out, you need to be aware of where your timing of your meds are, and that you might be more off, and you have to be prepared for that. Or you need to time your meds, or you need to choose carefully, you know. So me as a celiac, I would have to plan before I go to a restaurant what I'm going to eat to make sure I could eat. So it's the same thing. It's just making sure that maybe you choose lighter, you know, options. And in terms of like with the milk, I think if it's a dash of milk, I don't think that's an issue. Some people will literally say the minutiae bit of protein affects them. And I find that tends to be people who have the disease possibly longer. But having said that, I've seen young onset people mention they have issues with, you know, various different types of protein. The other thing is that research is showing that it's the amino acids that are the problem. It's what the protein breaks down into, and it's at the blood-brain barrier level that the problem happens. And there's some research showing that actually some amino acids help the levodopa to get into the brain, and some hinder it. But we need more research to get into that. I think there's not enough research done around levodopa, which is our main drug, which could be improved much more by actually focusing on the protein timing. And then back to what's called the protein redistribution diet, is where you move your protein more to the evening time, so that you basically have less protein interacting with your meds during the daytime. That gives you more on time. And there's research done, which we need to actually have much more current research, you know, to repeat it, is showing that people who actually follow a protein redistribution diet have a slower progression of Parkinson's. Now, I don't know if it's necessarily slower progression, but it's just they don't have to take as much levodopa because it's not interfering as much. So we need much more, research in this. What I say to people in the interim is do a food diary. So literally for, 3 days, 2 weekdays, and a weekend day, because we often change our eating, like this weekend. And, track. Just write, we have an app called My Moves Matter. It's free. You can do audio logs on or video logs, or you can track your symptoms on it. You write it down, whatever way you want to do it. Track what you eat, when you eat it, when you take your meds, and do you notice any difference in your symptoms? And a lot of people don't do that, and they kind of, they realize that actually they are going off because they don't think of non-motor symptoms as much as the motor symptoms, for example. So it's really, back to Brian's point, you are an N of 1, so you need to look at yourself and see, is it impacting you? And if it doesn't impact you, possibly it is also because, so what happens is, as you progress with Parkinson's, obviously we lose more neurons, but when we have plenty of neurons at the beginning, we produce our own dopamine, so that kind of makes up, so you don't notice the interaction with the meds as much, with the protein, but as you progress a bit more, you tend to notice it a bit more because you don't have as much of your own. Does that make sense? To balance it out. So I think it's just investigating yourself a little bit and noticing what impacts you and what doesn't. I hope that helps.
Great, thank you. Great question, Alan, and thank you for your answers. I guess we'll take one from online, if that's okay. There's been the same question from 3 separate people, so I'm sure it will answer some questions in the room. So from Catherine, Suzanne, and another Suzanne online, there's been a lot of interest in intermittent fasting. And, you know, what's the research evidence so far and any advice around this?
Well, in terms of the evidence is not there to advise people to do intermittent fasting. There is, I think, in terms of animal studies, that there's benefit in terms of fasting. What I would say is, again, if you take it from a practical point of view, most people eat way too long in the hours of the day, So they're eating and snacking, and obviously with Parkinson's, people often suffer from a lot of craving, sugar cravings and things like that. And that actually can be to do with their levodopa going off. They're craving, sort of boosting their dopamine. And people are eating until 10, 11 at night. So actually, if you just eat between the normal hours of like 7 in the morning to 7 in the evening, that's a form of fasting to a certain extent that's going to improve, because we sort of refresh our brain and get rid of, toxins, including alpha-synuclein turnover. And that's why a lot of people with Parkinson's are worse with lack of sleep. I definitely think it's an issue with the whole alpha-synuclein. I don't know what's going on there, but there's definitely something we need to find out about. So I think the answer would be just trying to actually restrict within the normal hours would see a lot of benefit, and actually eating like the Mediterranean-style diet, more healthy eating diets would benefit people, because fasting as well can lead to weight loss, and as I mentioned, that can lead to worse outcomes for people. So at the moment, I would say you can, try the 5-2 diet and that, but I wouldn't be sticking to it on the long term.
Great, thank you very much. Well, we've got time for a question in the room.
Hi, so I was just looking at the GLP-1, and I think I'm right in thinking that that's like the weight loss jabs as well?
Yes.
So for someone who is looking to lose weight, it's really infuriating that I think I meet some of the criteria for the jabs, but because I'm not got a heart condition, that's not something that my GP is willing to prescribe at the moment. Is that something maybe in the future that might be considered for Parkinson's if these research studies sort of prove promising?
Yeah, I think that would be one weapon and killing two birds with that, isn't it? So the only caveat in this is there is not enough data to suggest that it actually helps reducing the progression, but that's the whole aim. So if we can prove that it either improves even if the non-motor symptoms and patients with higher BMI where they qualify, then I don't see why it cannot be prescribed. But I think we need a bit more data. So currently the stage is phase 2. So it's safe. The only major side effect came up is vomiting and gut-related issues, really. But at the same time, we need to make sure that we understand the importance of using them, and also the fit criteria to support both weight loss and the Parkinson's symptoms.
Thank you very much. I think in the interest of time, I'm afraid if you've got any questions left over, or we can take the last one. This lady's waving at the front, Michelle.
Thank you.
Becky's there. Perfect. We'll take that as the last question.
Hi. I recently been given a book called The Parkinson's Protocol. It comes from America. It advocates a lot of Parkinson's producing foods and Parkinson's dopamine precursors. Does anybody have any opinion about those sort of things?
Yeah, so I mean, in terms of, for example, your protein actually helps to produce dopamine. And obviously there's the thing called mucuna pruriens, which is a natural form of levodopa, which actually they're looking at in places like Africa where they can't get access to levodopa, to actually harvest it, and it has been shown to be beneficial. Unfortunately, they're called fava beans. They're out there. You'd have to eat an awful lot of them because you need the carbidopa to get it into your brain. But there are a lot of foods that actually are, help towards producing dopamine in the body. So I wouldn't say there's necessarily a dopamine diet, but a lot of actually the foods within the Mediterranean diet are foods that would help to produce dopamine in the body. So I think, following that sort of pattern is going to get you the best bang for your buck in terms of producing dopamine in your brain, I think.
Yeah, there is just one thing I would like to mention, because there are some studies and the books, they suggest that these are good diet for dopamine, enhancing dopamine. But at the same time, we need to think about the current dose of levodopa we are already taking. So we just need to make a balance. If we take the supplements or food rich in dopamine, we also need to consider that how much external medication we are taking. So I think I would prefer more studies and research on the basis, because it may work for one person, may not work for the other.
And also, like Michael Oaken, who's an expert, a worldwide expert, he's looked at this, and a lot of the supplements that are out there, they're not regulated, so it can be more harmful. So you have to be very. And what I'd say, if you're taking any supplement, you need to talk to your neurologist and let them know, because it can interfere with things as well. So, but you can get it definitely from your diet as well to help.
Thank you. And I can see there's still more hands up. So, please do come and chat to our experts. A lot of them will be hanging around for the rest of the day. And if you have any questions online that haven't been answered, if you can email research@parkinsons.org.uk, and we'll do our best to answer them.
I meant to say the voucher code is PARCON20. All lowercase, if anyone wants to sign up to the programs.
Yeah,
and
Michelle's going to be in the research space if you want to hear more about that as well. So just thank you, and thank you again to Roche, who sponsored this session. And we're going to go to lunch now, you'll be pleased to know. But I've also been asked, as a quick reminder, please do check your trains for the way home, because there's planned rail works. And just in case you haven't spotted it, please do check your journey home. Thank you.